No, she has some issues. She told me.
And coming in, food ready.
All right, on my Zoom friends, can you guys give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen?
Mm. Yes.
All right, guys. So welcome to Reptiles, Amphibians, and You here at Connecticut Grizzly Zoo. Well, I didn't want to give you guys all of them. All right. So once again, welcome to Reptiles, Amphibians, and You. So in this presentation, we're going to be talking about all the reptiles and amphibians here at Connecticut Grizzly Zoo and around the state of Connecticut. So let's get started with a few definitions. There we go. Yeah. All right, so let's do some definitions. So when we're talking about the tree of life, we're talking about life, domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. For the rest of this, we're only going to be looking at kingdom and below because life, we're talking about everything, and domain, we're not going to be focusing on that. So everything from kingdom below is what we're going to be looking at for this presentation. And usually when we're talking about the scientific name of an animal, we're looking at the last two, genus and species. Sometimes we look at family, but usually we're looking at genus, species. All right, let's start off with reptiles. And you guys might be wondering, what are reptiles? Pretty sure CDC know this very well because I've done this presentation for them. But reptiles, they're a class. Remember we talked about class before? Class. So a reptile is any member of the class Reptilia. And that includes snakes, of course, crocodilians. So that includes crocodiles, caimans, alligators, and gharials. That includes lizards, snakes, turtles. Yeah. If I'm missing one, I'll just insert it in post. Now, the earliest reptiles originated about 312 million years ago. And snakes, as we know them, originated about 250 or so million years ago. So snakes have been around for a very, very long time, and the reptilia class have been around for even longer. Now, the skin of reptiles is very distinct. They're covered in scales, of course. So here we have the hypodermis, of course. We have the dermis and epidermis, just like we have in mammals and just like we have in ourselves. But on top of that layer, they're gonna have scales made of keratin. So the scales on top of their epidermis is what we're referring to when we talk about snakes. When we talk about the scales on top of a snake or the scutes on top of a turtle. But interestingly enough, the scutes on top of a turtle or tortoise, they're on top of bone. So you have that layer of bone which their shell is made of. Then you have the keratin scutes on top of that. And while we're talking about bones, the there's some animals, crocodiles and alligators are most known for this, but they have bone directly under their skin, and those are called, you know, osteoderms. So the osteoderms underneath their skin is a bony plate that kind of acts like armor for them. And we're actually learning that other animals have osteoderms, not just some mammals even. Amphibians. So going over to amphibians, again, we're talking about the class. So any animal in the class amphibia, they're considered amphibians. And these includes salamanders, of course, frogs, which are the most popular variety of amphibians, toads, which are another type of frogs, and caecilians, which we don't have here in the United States. They're a European species of amphibians, but they look a lot like worms, and we're gonna show you a picture of one in just a minute. Now, amphibians, well, most of them anyway, go through what's called metamorphosis, and metamorphosis just means change. And the change happens between their infancy, from when they start out as eggs to when they mature as adults, because they look completely different. So they'll go through that change. So when they hatch as an egg, they'll lose the gills that they have. Frogs, they'll lose the tails. They'll start to develop lungs and lose the tail, grow their arms and legs, and from there they'll emerge from the water and grow into their adult stages. Some amphibians, most notably the axolotl, which we have over in our rainforest building, they do not go through metamorphosis, so they're forever in their juvenile state. So if you want to see what a juvenile amphibian looks like, you can look at the axolotl right now. They have their external gills, and they spend their entire life underneath the water because they have to breathe inside the water. All right. With amphibians, unlike reptiles, they have the skin layers like we do. They have the dermis, epidermis, but their skin is porous. It's permeable because a lot of amphibians will can breathe and or drink through their skin. So it's covered in a mucus layer on top to keep them hydrated and keep their skin safe. But with reptile skin, it's a lot more sensitive than than with amphibian skin. It's a lot more sensitive than with reptiles. That's why whenever we're handling any of our amphibians here, currently the only ambassador amphibian is this guy right here. His name is Chunk. We actually wear gloves over, latex-free gloves. We wet it down with filtered water to get rid of any chlorine or heavy metals, and then we can actually pick this guy up just because their skin is so sensitive. All right. Some amphibians will have warts on their skin, toads, and some salamanders will actually have that as well. Um, it's not contagious. It's just a characteristic of them. It was actually believed that handling a toad would give you warts, but that's not the case. I promise you. I've handled toads, and you guys can see my hands are still without warts. I already mentioned the osteoderms. That's the bone directly underneath the skin. Taking a bit of water and gas. All right. So here are some examples now of some amphibians that we have. We have brightly colored amphibians, just like the poison dart frogs in the rainforest building. That acts as a warning sign to the native wildlife to stay away from them because they are poisonous. We have right here in the middle, see if we can get it on this screen. Right here in the middle, we have a Goliath frog, that is the biggest frog in the world. They're an Asian species. Second largest is a African bullfrog, and the third largest I do not remember off the top right now. What's this one called? This one is a Goliath frog. And over here off to the right, if you're facing the board, it's you have the Hellbender, Eastern Hellbender, and Annabelle is actually gesturing to the three we have in that 400-gallon tank, something like that. So we have three Hellbenders here in the Kathy Brady Education Center, formerly called the Research Station. And we have Tux, Galaxy, and Moonstone. And just below the Hellbenders, we have the Sicilians, and those are the European species of amphibians that I mentioned. So we're not going to see those here in this hemisphere, but just so you know that they do exist. Connecticut amphibians. So we have a number of them right here in Connecticut. We have 8 frogs, 3 toads, and I very much encourage you guys all to do Frog Watch. It is led by it's actually a partnership between the Maritime Aquarium, Peabody Museum, and Connecticut's Crazy Zoo. Our chapter is led by Jen Farrell, who I'm sure you guys all know. And she teaches you guys all about these frogs in Connecticut and how to listen for them. Now, the more common ones you're gonna see, at least here at the zoo, is the green frog. We see them all the time. Next to that, here on the grounds, we have the pickerel frog. We see them not quite as much, but we still see them a lot here on grounds. And they are a poisonous species. They're our only poisonous species of frog here. So if you ever see a pickerel frog, don't pick it up. You'll be usually you'll be okay. It's not that bad of a poison to us, but still be aware that they are poisonous. And some people will actually go out collecting frogs, and they might end up putting a pickerel frog in the same small area as some of the other frogs that we have on this list, and the other frogs won't make it just because that poison again leaches into the water, and again with the permeable skin of amphibians, they absorb that toxin, and they don't make it. Now, a frog that we hear a lot here in Connecticut, they're about 1 inch. They're the spring peepers. Very tiny frog, very loud call. So I hear those a lot more than I see them. I actually don't see them very often, but I hear them all the time. Another one with a very interesting call is the gray tree frog. Arguably one of the more attractive frogs that we have here in the state. Really cool. Really cool animal. So again, here's a list of the frogs and toads that we have. Salamanders and newts. Uh, you can see the list here as well. Common ones we have are the spotted salamander. Those you can see fairly often. They're basically all black with yellow spots all around their body. Those are very common to see. Marble salamander, those are another very attractive species of salamander here. I've never seen them in person, at least not in the wild, but I know we have them around here. And I think one of the most common salamander slash newt we have here in Connecticut is the red epts, also known as the eastern newt. They're they're a bright orangish red with some orangish spots all over the bodies, and then they will transform into that yellow bellied salamander, and they have a black rough bumpy back and all yellow underneath. All right, so here are some of the differences between frogs and toads. First of all, you guys will notice the clumps of seeds down here. And if you guys ever are here when Chris Rollins is here in the summer, you hear him sing about these differences. So frogs, they lay their eggs in clusters, almost like a grape cluster. And toads, they lay their eggs in long strands. So almost like a beaded necklace and a cluster of grapes. So if you see them, that's a very quick way to identify which animal, which animal, which animal's eggs you found. All right. So frogs generally they have to live near water. Their skin is softer, more permeable. So they need to be closer to water. Toads do not need to be as close to water. They still need water, of course, but they don't have to be as close. With toads, you can find them hopping around further away from water. Frogs, you'll typically find them inside the body of water itself, not often straying very far from it. Like I mentioned before, the mucus layer of these amphibians cause them to have a slimy feel to their skin. Um, but it's more just a wet kind of coating on them, keeps them nice and healthy. The hellbenders have a coat on them as well, and it feels like mucus, which is one reason they're called the snot otters, because it feels like their skin feels like you're holding boogers. Uh, Toads, they have more dry, rough and bumpy skin, again with the warts, not contagious. They typically have a narrow body, very strong hind legs, bulgy eyes. They do use their eyes to help them swallow. So if you ever see a frog eat, they'll jump forward and grab a piece of cricket or mealworm. You'll see them close their eyes and kind of push it back, and that's actually helping them swallow.
Mhm.
Toads have a wider body compared to frogs, strong hind limbs because they're much more adept at jumping than toads. Toads, they are of course able to jump, but they're not going to be jumping as well as a frog will. Frogs will have more predators, as opposed to toads, with some exceptions, of course. Toads typically have less predators. A lot of them are poisonous, and like I mentioned before, the differences in the egg sacs. Now, here are some examples of frogs and some of the frogs we have here in Connecticut. See which one of my students wants to help me out with identifying these frogs. You guys should all know them. Dan, good job. Yes, this is a great tree frog. This is the one I was mentioning before. And when these guys move, you can see how well they're camouflaged right now with the branch. When they move, they actually have some bright yellow on their thigh. Pretty cool. Spring peeper. Yes, absolutely. This is the 1 inch frog, and they make that you can see their chin kind of bulging out when they're making their peeping calls. American bullfrog above that one. Very good, Annabelle. North American bullfrog. Um, American toad is this one. Uh, Fowler's toad is this one. This one is the pickerel frog. Now, note that the pickerel frog and the leopard frog do have some similarities. They can look alike, and they are both found in this area. Pickerel frogs they're typically going to be brown, and they're going to have these longer markings on them. With leopard frogs, it's more rounded, and even though leopard frogs can be more brown, They are typically this greenish color here. This is another really cool frog that we have in our area. It's called the wood frog. It's always fun. I see these more often on my hikes than any other frogs. We have the green frog, which I mentioned before. We see a lot here on grounds. We have two frog ponds, one over by the Hanson building, and the other one is by right beside the otters. So that's the green frog. I know it's not very creative with their name. We have the green tree frog down below it, and we have the Fowler's toad up in this corner. So salamanders and newts. So yes,
Population loss decline.
yes, a little bit. So it's there's a lot of different types of frogs, and as of right now, with the frog watch that we have in the spring months, well, it starts in February, but with frog watch, we're actually collecting that data. We're finding out what frogs are where and how many of them they are. So again, very highly recommend that course. All right. Now, when it comes to sizes of these salamanders, the vast majority of the ones you're going to find are about 6 inches or less. You know, majority, not all of them. The hellbenders are another very good example because they're up to 2 feet long. The longest one we have here is 18 inches, and I think that's Galaxy. The other two are about 15 inches. I I haven't measured them in about 3 months, but that's how long they were 3 months ago. All right. A lot of them have internal fertilization, the type of fertilization that you're most familiar with. Some of them have external fertilization. That's where the sperm is picked up by the female. So the sperm is kind of shot out into the water, is picked up by the females, and then the females will lay their eggs and then use the sperm to fertilize it then, and then they grow outside of the female's body. And now outside of once their development is done within that egg, they'll start hatching. You'll see them with their juvenile characteristics, and then they'll go through stages after that of their development. All right. Now, some of them, namely the hellbenders and the axolotls. Fun fact about the axolotls is that they're also known as the Deadpool salamander. That's because if you guys have ever seen the movie Deadpool, he can regenerate almost every part of his body, and that same goes for the axolotls. A bit more so than the hellbenders, but they can regenerate as well. And regeneration is different from healing. I just have to point that out. Regeneration means everything comes back. So all the bone, the nerve ending, all the skin tissue, everything comes back with no scarring. With healing is a lot faster, which is why evolutionarily it's more beneficial for us. But regeneration takes a lot more time and energy. So the animal is going to be out of commission, so to speak, for a longer period of time. So here are the salamanders that we mentioned before, along with the red eft up in the corner, and the spotted salamanders that I mentioned before. So these are all the salamanders that we can find in Connecticut. I'd say on my hikes, I see between the red efts and the redbacks most. But if you guys see any other salamanders, take a picture and let me know what you see. Now let's talk about our amphibians, and that means the animals that we have here at the zoo. Now we don't have the Chinese salamander here at the zoo, but that's important to note because we do have a Chinese salamander skull on our artifact shelf. That's just beside the large Annabelle. Can you grab it for me, please? That's just beside the American alligator skull. So those are the largest salamanders in the world. They can get beside the alligator. I'm sorry, crocodile, beside the crocodile skull. Yes, beside that. Should be right there. Nope, that's I guess it's not up there. But those salamanders can get up to about 6 feet. So almost as tall as I am. Second to that is the Japanese giant salamander. They can get up to 4 feet long. Still a very, very impressive amphibian. And then third in the line and largest in the United States is the eastern hellbender, which we have here at the zoo. They can grow up to just over 2 feet long. So they're the third largest in the world, but largest in the United States. Actually, largest on in the Western Hemisphere. Now, as far as mud puppies go, they're similar in appearance to hellbenders. But they have those external gills. Hellbenders, they do not have their external gills once they become adults. Hellbenders have 5 toes in each foot. I know they hide most of the time, so you're not going to be able to count their toes. But mud puppies have 4. Hellbenders, they do have lungs, just like we do. They have lungs and they can breathe. And you will see them occasionally swim up to the top of the water and take a breath. And then once they fill their lungs with air, they can just hang there and float. Yeah. Fun fact, that's how divers float too. You float you float not with your gear, but with your lungs. Take a breath in, that makes you more buoyant, you float. But even though they do have lungs and they can come up out of the water and take a breath, they can also spend their entire life underneath the water, just like our hellbenders do. They'll come up occasionally, but say 95% of the time they're underneath the water because they can take that oxygen directly from the water through their skin. So they can breathe that way. It's called they can breathe through their skin, or it's called cutaneous respiration. Okay. Yeah, pickled frogs, like I mentioned before, they're a poisonous species. It's irritating to us as humans, but still don't pick them up. Still stressful for them. Now with them, yeah, they're the is that right? Only poisonous frog that we have here. Amazon milk frogs are a type of frog that we used to have here in the rainforest building. All right. Next up, we have our reptiles. Reptiles here in Connecticut. Now, allegedly, we have this 5-line skink here in Connecticut. I've never seen one. I've never seen anyone who's seen one, but according to reports, they are here. The Italian wall lizard, I also haven't seen, but that's an invasive species that some have reported seeing here. As far as snakes go, we have a number of snakes here in Connecticut and a few of them here at the zoo. We have the eastern rat snake, which is one of our ambassadors, which is just about 5 feet in front of me right now in the Kathy Brady Education Center. They're the longest snake we have in Connecticut. Their max is around 6 feet long. And or rat snake here at the zoo is almost there. He's about 5.5 feet right now. So we have the garter, Garter nodes, because a lot of people will call them garden snakes, which is not what they are. They kind of resemble a garter. You guys know what the garter is. So they kind of resemble that garter, which is how they got the name. They have that long stripe along them. We have the eastern hognose snake. Now the hognose snake has that. that pronounced extra pronounced rostrum. So that's the rostrum. If you guys know, that's the nose. So it's the point of your body that's outmost. So their rostrum is pointed up like that. So it's has that upwards shape that they can use to dig. We have the eastern milk snake, which they got their names because farmers would find them inside the barns. They thought that they were stealing the milk from the cows. Snakes are carnivores, they do not drink milk. What they were likely doing in those barns was eating the mice that were there because of the grain. So snakes do not drink milk, but the name stuck around. We have the ribbon snake, eastern worm snake, again, just a snake that looks like a worm, very small. Black racer, uh, northern brown snake, red belly snake, ringneck snake, water snake, not to be confused with the water moccasin, which we do not have in Connecticut. They're found further south. And water snakes, they can be territorial. They like to defend their territory, so they'll kind of chase you out, but they're not venomous. You have the smooth green snake, and as far as venomous snakes, not to be confused with poison. Venom just means that it just speaks to the method of delivery. So venom is injected, poison is ingested. So if something stabs you and pushes venom into your veins, then that's or pushes toxin into your veins, that's known as being venomous. If if it gets absorbed through your skin or through your eyes, nose, or mouth, again, don't lick frogs. But if you ever get toxin inside your body that way, that's known as being poisonous. So we have two venomous snakes here in Connecticut, the northern copperhead and the timber rattlesnake. And not very common in my experience, but they are here. I've seen people actually know someone who picked up one by accident. He was all right. And let's move on to turtles. We have a couple of different turtles here at in Connecticut, including the common snapping turtle. And we always tell people, just leave them alone, give them their space. If they're coming up on land, it usually means that they're just laying their eggs. So give them their space. Keep your dogs on a leash. You'll be okay. If you pick them up, they will try and bite you, and they have a bite force of about 1,500 pounds. So you do not want to get bitten by them. And their necks are a lot longer than you might think. Their necks are long enough to go up out of their shell and down towards the back, about more than halfway down their shell. So just an animal you should definitely not pick up if you really don't have to. You might see them crossing the road if you ever want to give them a nudge in that direction because they're heading somewhere for a reason. So if you push them back off to the side, they'll going to be trying to go back across the road. But again, with snapping turtles, let's give them their space. We have bog turtles, eastern box turtles, which we have three ambassadors here at the zoo. They're up in our education offices. We have the painted turtles, and another very common turtle to see when I'm on a hike. The diamondback terrapin. Terrapins are a brackish water species, so you'll find them in the Sound. The red-eared slider, invasive, but they're native to down in Florida. I have found them here in the wild. We're actually over in the river by the dam, and Caroline, Jim, and myself found a red-eared slider. We have the wood turtle and the common musk turtle. All right. Now, as far as turtles go, I mentioned a bit about these guys before, so I'm just going to mention that generally, when it comes to turtles, just the last point right there, they're generally omnivores, while tortoises are herbivores. So if you guys remember the tortoises that we have in the summertime, the big African spur thigh or sulcata tortoises, you'll see them getting lots of kale and lettuce and watermelon. Those guys are herbivores. With Turtles, typically omnivores, even though you'll mostly see them eating fish, worms, and so forth. But they will eat vegetation as well. So here are some of the examples of the turtles that we have. Doing the painting turtle, stepping turtle, ritter slider. Uh, because of the pet trade, it's now illegal to have a red slider as a pet. They've been outlawed in the state now. All right. So as far as the turtles that we have here at the zoo, we have a redfoot tortoise. Her name is Matilda, and she's been here among the longest. She's one of our most recent animals. Sorry, or longest had animals. She lives in the rainforest building. We have Ritter sliders. They're in the pond over by the aviary. We have red-bellied sliders, peninsula sliders, also in the pond over by aviary. Spotted turtles. They're they're over in the farmyard. No, I think they were moved over to the reptile house. So it's hard to see them right now because they're in that small building. We have the eastern box turtles. They've been moved from that reptile house into the Education Ambassador collection. The Mata Mata turtle. It's a turtle with a very long neck and a weird shaped head. They have a very long nose as well. But they're in the Cayman pool in the rainforest building. We have the eastern mud turtle, which has also been moved from the reptile house over to our ambassador animal collection. And that turtle lived for a while with Galileo, who's our map turtle over here in the education center. They're not very good roommates. It's been a good couple of years, but now the mud turtle is in the back. Lizards, lots of really cool lizards. Again, we have that one native lizard. Never seen it before. And here's some of the examples of lizards that we have. Right in the middle, so you guys should immediately recognize this one. Dan, what's this? Legless lizard. Yes, it is a lizard without legs. No, it is not a snake. That's a very common misconception. Snakes are not just lizards without legs. They have lots of other characteristics that make them what they are. For for instance, legless lizards have what that snakes don't. Alexis. Eyelids. Yep. Snakes have a protective layer of skin over their eyes. So they technically can't close their eyes. So their eyes are always open. With legless lizards, they do have eyelids, so they can open and close their eyes. But the main characteristics of snakes is how their jaws move. So snakes, they have they have jaws almost like we do, but there's a split right in the middle. So they have two individual pieces. And Annabelle, I know there is a snake skeleton on the shelf. Can you grab it for me, please? So they have two individual pieces as their bottom jaw, so they can move them independently. Should be on the bottom shelf. So they can move them independently around whatever they're trying to eat. And they can actually expand their heads to be about 5 to 10 times the size of their, so they can open their mouths, but 5 to 10 times the size of their head. So they can eat prey that are bigger than themselves. Perfect. So what Annabelle is bringing me is a diamondback rattlesnake's skull. And this one is real, so I have to be a bit more gentle with it. Come on. There we go. So you guys can see here on the camera. It is two pieces. It's not one piece, and they can move independently and they can stretch outwards. So I'm gonna pass it around to everyone here. Well, not pass it around, but I'm gonna show you. You guys, yeah, look at the very, very top of the time. You see that opening for the pattern. All right, guys. And I also have a non-venomous snake skull here. These, again, they're real, they're fragile. So this one unfortunately got broken. But you can see that it is one piece that comes around and does not connect to the other one. And you guys can see a very interesting distinction between a venomous versus a non-venomous type of snake here. And that the venomous snakes, they have that long fang. So how they hunt is that they strike, bite, inject that venom, and retract very, very, very quickly. With non-venomous snakes, they will bite. You'll notice that their teeth are angled backwards, so that if something is pulling away, their teeth just get sunk into their skin even more. Bird-eating snakes like the green tree python over in the rainforest building have the same type of teeth. They're just a lot longer because they have to get through the feathers. So with the legless lizard, they do not have that because they're lizards, not snakes. Uh, we have the blue-tongued skink. That's another education ambassador animal. On the older side, so he's semi-retired. We have a green iguana, which is one of our previous animal ambassadors here. And of course, the five-line skink and the Italian wall lizard. All right, crocodilians. These are very, very large, very powerful prehistoric predators. You guys can see these guys have been around for millions of years, and their adaptations have mainly remained the same. But you can get me the crocodile skull. Yeah. So with American alligators, so this is the American alligator skull that I have with me here. You can see their snout, and actually one of the main differences that you're gonna get, I'm sorry, one of the main questions you're gonna get is about the differences between alligators and crocodiles, and that is their shape of their snout. So Annabelle's gonna help me demonstrate with alligators, specifically the American alligators. They have more of a U shape of their snout. With the American crocodile, it's more pointed. So you guys can see it comes out and forms like a V. Also with the American alligator, which I have, when they close their mouths, the top teeth will come down and cover the bottom teeth. With American crocodiles, that doesn't happen. It's all zigzag and jagged. And one of the cool things we always tell people about estimating the size of an American alligator, because they'll submerge their entire body underneath the water and just have their head, not even their entire head, just their ears, their eyes, and the nose above the water. Sometimes it's so much slightly out of the water that you'll have some water over here, just over the snout. So they just tip as little as possible out of the water. All right, thank you, Annabelle. So with that, a lot of their body is hidden. So you might not be able to identify how big the animal that you're looking at is. Again, hopefully from afar, but you won't be able to identify. But there's a very unique relationship between the distance between their eyes and the nose in terms of inches that roughly relates to the size of the animal in feet. So if we look at the inches between the nose and the eyes, it's estimated about 6 inches. Yes, about 6 inches. So you'll be looking at about a 6 foot alligator. Yes. You find American crocodiles down south. Find them in Florida. Fun fact, the only place in the world where you can find both alligators and crocodiles living together is Anvil, Florida, down in the Everglades. It's the only place you can find American alligators and American crocodiles living together. So with the class Crocodilia, we have crocodiles, alligators, caimans. We do have a Yakara caiman in the reinforced building, and gharials. We do not have any gharials here at zoo. Now, some people might use the word crocodile interchangeably because they're all in the family Crocodilia, but here at the zoo we want to make that distinction. So we make sure we're saying alligators versus crocodiles versus caiman. And here at the zoo we do not have crocodiles either, but we have an American alligator behind me here in Kathy Brady Education Center. We have an adult alligator in the wetlands just across from the crane before you get to the otters. And we have again that caiman in the rainforest building. All right, already mentioned that. Now, crocodiles and crocodilians, all of them, they possess what's called a tepidum lucidum. And you guys can also see this in cats and dogs. It's commonly referred to as eye shine. That's because when light hits their eyes, sometimes if you take a picture of a dog with flash on, you'll see their eyes glowing. And that's what that is, just a tepidum lucidum, which reflects light back. 1 second. Hey, Jeremy. All right, everything. All right, Annabelle, Rachel, you're up. Annabelle, you get to pack animals? Down. All right. Sorry about that. So yeah, I was mentioning that the tapidum lucidum, you can also see that in cats and dogs, and that's just a layer behind the retina in their eyes. It acts like a mirror. So if any light gets in their eyes and misses the retina, that that reflective layer or the tapidum lucidum reflects light back onto the retina, so they can see a lot better than we can, and in no light. The next really cool thing about them is that they have a nictitating membrane, and that's just another transparent eyelid that goes to the side. You can actually see it when, say, a baby alligator comes up out of the water and starts poking at his head above the water. You can see that membrane coming over. And that just acts like a pair of goggles on them. So they can see and they can prevent any debris from getting in their eyes when they're swimming underwater. So here's some pictures to demonstrate. Our lizards. So going back to lizards, we have one legless lizard in the rainforest in the Kathy Brady Education Center. We have our American alligator, like I said, the Yakara caiman, but we also have the blue-tongued skink as our ambassador animal. All right, moving on to snakes. Now, snakes are in the order of serpentine serpents. Uh, they're an elongated species of animal, so all the organs as well are going to be elongated. So everything inside their body is just stretched out. They have no external ears. They don't hear the same way we do. They do not have an eardrum. How they how they sense vibrations is actually through their belly scales. They feel the vibration of whatever is running by them. So like I mentioned before, their eyes are covered in that clear scale. You can see it. Uh, you can see it up in this corner, and this snake is about to shed, which is why the breel or that clear scale is turning that color. It's known as being in the blue for a snake. That just means they're shedding and you should leave them alone because they can't see very well at that point. All right. Their jaws are not hinged, like I did the demonstration before, so they can open their mouths wider than their head. And some have an evolutionary vestige of where their legs used to be. Here we go. So just down here, this is where the hip bone used to be. So this is where their legs used to be connected to. And on some of the snakes today, you can actually still see them, specifically on the ball pythons. It's very pronounced on those species. Now here are some of the examples, some of the snakes that we talked about before. And I made a point to let you guys know about the rostrum of the hognose snake. So you can see this scale is harder and more pronounced. This is the milk snake that does not drip milk. And here is or black, formerly called black rat snake, but now known as eastern rat snakes. And the water snake, often confused with the water moccasin. Are snakes. So in the Castle Brady Education Center, we have buzzer, we have a king snake. We used to have a hognose snake. We have a red-tailed boa constrictor that she is just about 8 feet long now. Big, very strong girl. We have an emerald tree boa, uh, Amazon tree boa, not anymore. No more garter snake or milk snake. So we only have a handful of snakes right now. All right. Now, the main point to note is their metabolism and how they process how they keep themselves warm, essentially. And you guys might hear that snakes and reptiles are cold-blooded, and a lot of people their minds go straight to thinking that their blood is cold. Fair, because we call them cold-blooded. But what that actually means is that they get their energy they get the energy to warm themselves from external sources. So the scientific name for that and the term we're starting to move toward is ectotherm. Ecto meaning outside, therm, temperature. So their internal body temperature is controlled by external sources. So if they're very cold, they can't they can't shiver like a mammal will. They don't have hair to insulate them like a mammal does. What they'll do is go find a hot spot. So they'll go out in the sun, they'll bask in a hot rock, and then that will bring their internal body temperature up. Here at the zoo, we give them lights that will provide heat to them. If you guys come into the Kathy Brady Education Center, you'll notice there's a red lamp behind their normal white daytime lights. There's a red light behind that, and that provides heat so that they can bring their body temperature up as much as they need to. And also with reptiles, you have to give them the option to cool themselves off. So they know when they need to be warm, they know when they need to not be as warm. So you give them the option of a spot in their habitat that's warmer and a gradient to their lower tolerable temperature. All right. Now with mammals, we have a bobcat, for example. So all mammals, we can control our body temperature internally. So what we call that is being endothermic. So endo inside therm temperature. So we control our body through our metabolic processes. So when it gets cold, our body will shiver. We still have that evolutionary vestige of having goosebumps, so our hair will stand on end. Doesn't work for us because, again, especially for me, there's nothing there. Like if you bring a microscope, you can probably see something there, but it's really empty. So with mammals that have a lot of hair that he can stand on end and help to trap some of that heat close to their body. They have and we can rev up our metabolic processes to produce more heat. So we can control our body temperature on the inside. If it gets too hot, we all know we sweat, and that can help to cool us down through evaporative cooling. But that does require a lot of energy. So what we do, especially we see this with our bobcat, is that will put on a lot more. We'll consume a lot more calories, and when it's colder outside, so that we can meet that energy demand to keep our bodies warm. All right. Any so just to emphasize these points, endotherm and ectotherm, these are the terms we're moving towards because cold-blooded and warm-blooded isn't the entire picture. So there are some reptiles that can get their max temperature, like the African tortoises, their max temperature is a bit over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And that would be considered a fever for us. Technically, a fever for us is 100.3. Anything over that is fever, but they can withstand higher temperatures even though they are cold-blooded. So it's not entirely accurate, just in terms of the way you hear it. Just wanted to make sure that you guys remember these terms. All right. And now I've been talking for about an hour now. Are there any questions? Marcia?
The secret to know is that smell.
Yes. Yes. So you might find some people that say that when a snake sticks their tongue out like this, it is tasting or smelling. It's essentially the same thing. They stick their tongue out and they kind of wave it back and forth. And what they're doing is picking up particles in the air. And when those particles get picked up by the tongue goes up into the roof of their mouth into an organ called the Jacobson's organ, and that can help them to determine what's around them. So it's essentially what we do when we're smelling. We're pulling, but you know, we're pulling particles in with our breath and determining what it is. And they have a fork in their tongue. It's split in two different directions so that they can better give themselves a sense of direction. So if they pick up more particles on the left versus the right, that can tell them where to go. That's good. Yeah.
For the most part, reptile, they don't do much of that. Because I
Yeah.
think the boa is the kind of small boa.
Oh yeah, or Reptile boa. I mean, she has vertical space so she can climb, but there, yeah, she stretches. Yeah,
I
yeah. Those snakes are good at climbing, especially when they're younger. They don't climb as much when they're older, but they she has vertical space, so she can move up and down. No, they don't.
it's just kind of
They don't do a whole lot. Buzzer he'll be crawling around sometimes. I haven't seen him do it very recently, but he'll start crawling around and just kind of exploring the habitat. You can see that he has vines because he's another snake that climbs, known as our arboreal species. So we give him lots of options to climb. Dan, that I have not heard. I All right. So I have Deanna who is asking me if there's a photo of a pickerel frog on the zoo website. I think that picture has been taken down last I checked, so it shouldn't be there because our pickerel frog did pass away. He was about 8 years old, which is on the longer side for a pickerel frog. And regarding the quote unquote reptile house and farmyard, no, it's really just a small building. You can kind of peek in through the window, but no, it's super tiny. Do we have any alligator teeth? Kathy was asking. I believe we do. I haven't used them in a while, but their teeth will actually break off frequently, and they can grow new ones, so it really doesn't bother them. They grow. I think one tooth can regrow up to 50 times in the animal's lifespan. So it's really not a big deal for between 80 and 100 teeth. That's great. I'm sure we have alligator teeth somewhere. I just don't know where they are right now. Yes. Yes.
Right color. The one. What is predator? Oh,
Yeah.
bright color is something that is bad. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, it does seem so. So for those of you guys on Zoom, Joseph was asking if the bright colors wouldn't in fact attract the animals, attract predators toward a brightly colored animal like a poison dart frog. And the thing is, animals that have evolved alongside the poison dart frogs, they know what that means. So they know that brightly colored means don't waste your time, go somewhere else. But if you have an invasive species, they might not know that. So an invasive species would not actually use that as a warning sign.
Basically, species that are with it,
Yes.
kind of knows what happened.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's actually happening with cane toads, which are another really, really big species of toad from South America. They're considered an invasive species right now in Australia. They have they have grown in population and size over there. There was one discovered a few months ago that was estimated to be the size of a football.
Oh, wow.
That's not a small animal. And animals over there, they're not used to cane toads, and they'll eat them. And cane toads are in fact poisonous, and those animals will start to die. But animals that are from their native range, they know to leave them alone. But funny enough, there are some animals in Australia that have started to figure out how to eat a cane toad. There were reports of, forgot the type of crane that would take the frog and kind of whip it back and forth so that the frog would then expel all the toxin, because the toxin glands are right above the shoulders of the king toad. So they'll whip it back and forth, have it expel all that toxin. And then once it's done, they'll lie the frog on its back, then eat the bellies, leaving the poison on the back alone. And there's some birds of prey that will also figure out that if they flip the frog over and just start picking at the belly, they can avoid the toxin altogether. So animals, they learn and they adapt. All right, got some more questions on our line here. Uh, do we only have one legless? We have two legless lizards. We have pointy and stubby. And pointy has an intact tail, so it still comes down to that fine point. Stubby at one point lost the tip of his tail. It regrew, but it's not
Okay.
it's not the same as it was before. not pointy anymore. It's stubby. But when a legless lizard regrows their tail, you guys know lots of lizards can, well, some of them can do that, including legless lizards. It's it's just cartilage that grows back. It's not the bone or anything. So it's not what it was before. And DJ was saying poison dart frogs are poisonous because of what they eat in the rainforest. Yes, that is true. So poison dart frogs get their poison from a specific type of ant. I forgot the name of that ant, but they'll eat that ant and take the poison from that ant and put it in their skin. But the ants themselves get their poison from a specific plant that they eat. So the poison moves from the plant to the ant to the frog, and they will still retain that bright color even if they don't have that species of ants to feed on. Because here at the zoo we give them wingless fruit flies. Sometimes they'll get pinhead cricket, but mostly the wingless fruit flies. And they'll still have that brightly colored skin as a warning. However, though, if people will ask you if you can get poison dart frogs as a pet, and technically, yes, you can buy them at certain exotic pet stores. But we do warn them that you have to pick your buyers wisely because they can, even if they're no longer that, they can still remain. They can still stay poisonous for up to 2 years after their last meal. So if someone is going down to South America and grabbing a bunch of poison dart frogs, might have them for a month and start feeding them fruit flies, you can still be buying a poisonous animal.
I was thinking that because they're not poisonous when they're born. Thinking if they really had no predator bias, if they're overwhelming number, then I'm thinking
Yeah.
on they get a lot of them get eggs.
Yeah. Frogs will lay their laying egg.
Must be.
Yeah, and again, they have a this not everyone survives their journey to adulthood. And Kathy Sabia was asking if it's true that all lizards can regrow their tail. And no, not all lizards can regrow their tail. They can drop it as a stress response. So if anything is ever coming after them, they can just drop their tail and say, "Hey, predator, you take the tail," and the tail will still wiggle. So the predator will think that they're going to be holding something that they're going to have to wrestle down as if they were holding a real animal. And then the lizard can get away, regrow their tail. Some of them can regrow their tail only once, and others, I know they can do it more than once. I'm not sure how many times, but some of them can only do it once.
Okay.
Or legless lizards they're one of the species that can regrow their tail, and they're also called a glass lizard because of how they drop their tail. So if they drop their tail, it will break into many different pieces, almost like if you drop glass. Yeah, so that's why they're called glass lizards. So we have to be very careful and to observe the signs of stress in these animals. Because if I'm ever holding this guy in front of a bunch of third graders or what have you, I have to be watching this animal because if it becomes too stressed, it could drop its tail in front of a bunch of kids, and do not want that. I mean, I don't want the animal to drop its tail, period. Definitely don't want it to happen in front of an audience. All right. All right. Any other questions from the in-person audience or my Zoom friends? All right. All right. Thank you, Kathy. All right. So we're gonna say goodbye. We're gonna wrap up the session, and I'll make the recording available within the next few days. Just bear with me. But bye, guys. Take care.